I bid you welcome.
Hey, Reeves.
Hello.
So, we're the same age, and we never knew each other when we were kids, but it's been strange talking to you over these past few years on other podcasts and the like and getting to know you, how similar our cultural upbringing has been.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot to do with being exposed to not only the same culture, but the same the same television shows that we did growing up. Now, for the listeners out there, this show is primarily going to be about children's television in 1970s and 80s UK. So for American listeners and people that are, splattered all over the planet, hang in there because there's some really unusual and thought-provoking shows that were once broadcast to the young, molded minds of children that have long since gone.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start with this one, Reeves?
Well, yeah, I think we have known each other, nearly 20 years now. It's crazy. Isn't it?
Crazy. Jesus.
But the thing is that when we were children, we didn't live near each other. We
didn't know each other.
We were considerable distance apart. But our growing up and our should we say our television time, because obviously we've got to set the stage. I mean, when you're growing up in the 70s, your television, what programs you see and what you're exposed to is incredibly limited, only through comics, books, the library, and our TV time. I mean, I was lucky if I saw an hour and a half to 2 hours of telly a day.
Right.
I mean, that was considered a lot back then. And so I think that the TV shows that we were exposed to were of a much higher quality than they are today, because they have to put more into it to make it a better product.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think when you say a higher quality, though, I don't think we both don't mean production value, because that clearly wasn't the case.
No.
When you say the content, exactly, the actual content, the writing, the stories, the messages that the powers that be at that time were pumping into these little brains that were quietly forming, were a lot more advanced than what appears to be broadcast today. For example.
Yeah.
I'd like to start with some of my earliest memories of kids TV, and one of them was a kids television show called Look and Read, and this was a show that I only remember seeing it at school. It was when I was in infant school, so I must have been, I don't know, 6, I guess. 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I remember it around that time.
But it really did kind of burn into my brain some very strange ideas. This show was called Look and Read, and it was called Cloudburst. And I remember distinctly being ushered out of the classroom with all the other kids, and being made to sit on the hard wooden floor of the hall in the infant school, and they would wheel out this ginormous television with a big, huge VCR video recorder underneath it. There's like this massive, big block of God knows what. And I'll tell you how old this video cassette recorder was. Is that it wasn't even VHS. It was U-matic, because it had these enormous tapes that they would slam into this thing. And we would watch this show called Look and Read Cloudburst. Now, this was a kids show to teach kids about like words and reading and things like that. But it was also a science fiction show. And I remember it distinctly, and I remember seeing it at school, and I remember seeing it at home when I was at home sick. When I had the day off and I would stay home, and I'd flip through the channels, like early in the morning on BBC Two. This thing was on. I remember thinking, "Oh, I saw this at school." But Cloudburst was a very strange show because, now check this out. Now this came out in, let me check the date on this. In 1974 was when this was shown on the BBC. And the gist of this show was global warming and weather manipulation. I'll play a little bit right here. Look and read. This is the theme music for it. Very 70s, as you can hear. And this is just a bunch of images of clouds and scorched earth, and then cloudburst. And it's about these kids that discover this scientist that's created a weapon that can make it rain. Watch. Listen to this.
Why do you call it a rain gun?
Because it makes rain. It fires rockets into the air.
What's in the rockets?
A very new kind of gas.
What about my control unit?
Well, Ram must have it with him. Look, I tell you what. We won't be long. You can wait here if you like. Ram can give it to you when he gets back.
He fell for it. Now we can get the firing program.
There was like an Indian guy in there, and he was like the main.
He was the villain.
He was the villain, right? And everyone was like, "Oh, whenever you'd see him, he'd be up to no good." But I think I vaguely remember at the end of the show, he turned out to be the good guy. He was like, "No, I was doing this to save you," and blah blah, blah and all this nonsense. But just think about that for a second, though. 1974, kids' TV program to teach them how to read, and the content of the show talked about global warming. It wasn't called global warming back then, and weather manipulation. It's pretty staggering, you know?
Well, it is. I mean, you think that, if you compare what children are watching today at that age and what we were watching back then at that age, it's such a massive contrast. There's a massive contrast in what you're actually learning. I mean, I remember that I have early recollection of that show, and I have early memories of that show. And obviously the villain, or stroke villain, good guy, stood out because he was always turned up in his dark suit, and he had the chauffeur-driven car, and he had the glasses and the beard, and it was like he was the villain. But it was like it was. You'd think as a child you would get really bored of those kind of but it was like science fiction. It was, you wanted to watch more of it because it was something that it was possibly got you thinking. It made you think about the environment, and you can manipulate the weather.
Sure. Now, there was another show also, which I have very memories about. It's kind of creepy, that sound, huh? But this was this show. It was so weird that I almost remember as I grew up that I kind of invented it, that it didn't really exist, Mm-hmm. Now, this show was called Sky, and this was another one show. This came out in 1975, and I remember seeing this as a little kid on TV. And this was another kids TV show about the environment, and this was about an alien that came to Earth and grew out of the ground into a human form, and he had blue eyes. Now, I don't just mean like he's just got regular human blue eyes. His entire eyeball was blue. And he looked a bit like David Bowie. He had a kind of a David Bowie vibe to him. And he was on Earth to warn people about the global catastrophe if they don't take care of the Earth. I'll play a little bit of it. And the theme is very like spooky and 70s, and I mean, when you think about it, this is a kids' TV show. Listen to that. very, you know.
Never has a xylophone been so scary.
Never. This is a picture of the Earth all turning blood red. You know, all negative images. And there he is, this guy, appearing in the forest. And the wind blowing. And he's covered with like this wispy, like, fur. It's bringing back lots of memories just watching this right now. I'd forgotten all this. All right, now here's a scene right here. This is from the first episode, where there's a scene where he goes underground and he gets covered by all these leaves, and the wind blows all these leaves all over him, completely covers him. And there he's being covered by these leaves. And the crazy thing is that I remember as a child playing out in the fields behind my house, and it must have been, you know, autumn or fall, as they say over here, and all the leaves were coming off the trees, and it got windy, and there was a big pile of leaves on the ground, and the leaves blew from the wind, and I remember thinking, oh look, it's like sky. And I remember diving into the leaves and lying there still, letting the leaves blow over me, imagining I was sky, like a mental case, you know.
Could you imagine? I mean, when you think about programs like that, you could say that it's got pagan undertones to it.
Oh, big time.
You know,
big time.
But you could imagine them going to the BBC and, well, I've got this idea for a new kids show, and he's like, okay, lay it down, tell me what it's all about, and we'll see if we'll go with it. Well, see, this alien comes from another planet. He goes into the Earth, and he grows out of the Earth, and he warns all the children on the Earth of global catastrophe. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right, we'll go with that. Yeah, make something. Go make something.
Yeah,
go
that's
write
great.
some scripts.
That's excellent. Here's several £100,000. Go make one.
Do you think you could do that for a budget for £500?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll contact finance immediately. But, you know, it's like, I mean, today you'd be laughing. Get the fuck out. What's the matter with you? Get out of here. But back then it was accepted.
It was, because the concept is, I would say, it's got sort of paganistic undertones and you know, the kind of the Mother Earth thing and the growing from the earth and all those things that go with that. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't think of that. You think of what you see on the screen. But I think that people back then, the writers who wrote these episodes, they really knew how to get into kids' heads and get them interested in very fringe topics without you really knowing what you were watching.
Right.
It's like you didn't really have to understand it because it was written in such a way that you could understand it.
Mm-hmm. And there was so many of these shows, you know, throughout the 70s.
There were loads. Yeah.
Throughout the 70s up to the early 80s, and then it kind of it changed. It kind of went away from like 1984, 1985. It changed.
Well, you know, I believe that in the mid 80s onwards, because that was the birth of home computing and stuff. I think that the whole social mindset of children's television and children's programming changed because it wanted to involve technology more.
Right.
As where back in the 70s, like a decade before, there was none of that. There were, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, one of the shows that I remember was the Tomorrow People.
Oh, yes.
You know?
That was a great one. Here's a quick memory for you, Reeves. Have a listen to this. Great theme.
Yeah.
What's amazing though is like a lot of the like the 60s and 70s TV shows, they're the greatest fucking themes ever, you know?
Yeah.
For like TV shows, like really good, creepy, unusual, weird themes. Tomorrow People, though, it was a show that I remember really enjoying. I don't know why. I get the feeling that it used to be on a Sunday night.
I can't remember what day it was on.
I totally get the vibe it was on a Sunday, but I don't know whether it was actually broadcast on a Sunday or whether it was rerun on a Sunday. I don't know, but I remember watching episodes of it on a Sunday. And I always so basically for the uninitiated, the Tomorrow People was like it was the next phase of human evolution.
Yeah, they'd evolved. Yeah,
the humanity was evolving into the next. It was we were all Homo sapien, and they were going to be Homo superior, and they all had telekinetic powers, and there was
they had these little they had these little boxes they wore that connected them together.
Right, and they used to have
and they could jump to different times, time zones.
They could teleport, and they would call it a jaunt. So they would go,
"That's it, a jaunt,
quickly. Let's jaunt to wherever the fuck." And I remember they had these really cool belts that they used to wear, and they'd push the belts, and that would make them teleport someplace else.
Yeah, they had to think it, didn't they? They had to think
where they were going to go, and they teleport.
Yeah, and they would go. Yeah.
But it was like the next evolution of humanity.
They had like a headquarters.
Yeah. Underground.
And it had like a robot. It was a brain.
It was like a brain, like a computer brain called Tim, which would help them. That was like I guess an alien computer, if I remember. I don't remember. But the Tomorrow People was an amazing show. I remember there was some rivalry at the time between the Tomorrow People and Doctor Who, because Doctor Who was on the BBC,
Yeah.
Tomorrow People was on HTV, and there was like some kind of, because I mean similar shows, they deal with alien invasions and the like and things like that. But I enjoyed both shows equally.
So basically, the Tomorrow People ran from 1973 to 1979.
Right.
So that would have been around the time, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know far more about Doctor Who than I do, but I do remember being a great fan of Doctor Who when I was a kid, and it was John Pertwee and Tom Baker. Wouldn't that have been around the era of both of those?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So Tom Baker quit. I'm sorry, John Pertwee left, if I remember correctly, in 1975. And then Tom Baker was the Doctor from like 1976 through 1981.
So that would have been right around that time. So maybe having those characters, those Doctor characters around that time was good for Doctor Who, because it was kind of that same, that kind of same sci-fi vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all right. The Tomorrow People were mainly young, early teenage.
Well, all of the main protagonists in these shows were children, right? Which is ridiculous to begin with, but because it was aimed at children, then it made sense for the main characters to be kids themselves.
But the Tomorrow People, they dealt with what I would call, you could say that a lot of the themes that they dealt with was adult themes. It was, saving the Earth from some destruction or something was going to happen. And it was always very grown up themes. Yet again, it was this kind of, this kind of like what I would class that you'd have to see in something like Quatermass.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, the thing is that these shows, they were aimed at children, and the stars of the shows were children, but the themes and the content were very adult. Even the language was very adult. You'd hear children, talk in scientific terms and use big words, right? And when you're exposing a young audience to that kind of vocabulary and that kind of mindset and views, it does nothing but expand the mind of the viewer, right? Because you're exposing yourself to ideas and concepts that otherwise you would not be exposed to.
Yeah, that's correct. That's true. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Around that time, you had other shows that were. I mean, there's another one back in the early '80s. There was Chucky, the young boy who had the invisible friend who was an alien. who was always doing crazy stuff and getting into trouble and he blamed it on the alien friend. So we start to get that kind of sci-fi, but it starts to move away from being too serious, but still very well made.
Yeah,
the stories were interesting, but it was still that kind of.
Here it is. Thames TV. Chucky. Well, dude, the show starts with a scream. As soon as this is, next on ITV, he's like, and next on ITV, we have this week's episode of Chucky. Now, just noticed it right now. Chucky was written by John Wyndham, right? Who also wrote Day of the Triffids.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can see by the visual style of this show, just watching the beginning here, it's 1984, so it's heavily influenced by what was huge back then, which was Star Wars. Was in the movie theaters, and there was all the Battle Beyond the Stars and all these Star Wars wannabe sci-fi movies. It was like a resurgence of science fiction. So you can see it was heavily influenced by that. But having said that, even though there was a huge influence by sci-fi culture, there's also a very kind of occult 70s vibe thrown in there also.
Yeah, I think the undertones of we were talking before the show about the occult and how it seemed to be more accepted back in the 70s. You saying you could buy magazines about the occult?
Yeah, well, it was
in the supermarket, and it's everyone seemed to be more accepting of the the darker side, or however you want to put it, witchcraft and stuff. And a lot more people would read about it, and it would be more openly talked about. But it seems that as the years have gone by, that's kind of like, oh no, it has
changed
its own
significantly.
Yeah,
I think the throughout the mid '60s, early '70s, occult, witchcraft, Satanism, all the dark arts and all that stuff. It was becoming more mainstream. And I think it was an offshoot of '60s culture where people were exploring new ideas or different ideas and pushing the boundaries and trying different things throughout society and culture. So that was a natural fit, right? If you look at the movies back then, even American television movies like Trilogy of Terror and all of these kind of what they call it folk horror. And all that stuff that was going on, the Secrets of Harvest Home, and all these great, awesome TV movies and movies, Race with the Devil. Remember that one? All these movies were very much in tune with the culture of that time. Now,
and yet, if we look, if anybody said, well, give me an example of a children's program that clearly has got the occult mixed in it in some ways, and I would immediately say, go watch Children of the Stones.
Oh my God! Oh yes. Now this show, it was compulsive viewing as a kid, but it was also it was very unnerving.
Yes, very. I had many nightmares.
It was very. When you think this was a kids show, even when you watch it now, it's obviously a children's show. Yeah. And there's lots of little, very children's trappings, as far as story ideas in the narrative. But the overall theme, it's very, very freaky. And to give listeners an idea of how freaky this show was, let me play you the theme tune to this. This is. Now remember, this show is aimed at children, like from 7 to 12 years old. Now listen to the theme for Children of the Stones.
Can I come out now from behind the sofa?
Fuck. You know,
That was scary.
That was scary. I mean, it's a freaky theme for a kid show, and it was a great show. It was shades of the Wicker Man in many ways. It had that kind of Wicker Man kind of vibe.
Yeah, it was. What's his name? The guy that played Blake from Blake 7.
Yeah, Gareth Thomas played the.
That's it.
And
he went.
He was the dad of the kid that moves to this little village where they have these big stone circles. It was set in
Avebury, wasn't it?
Yeah,
with the stone circles.
With the stone circles.
And, I think what was the the underlying thing was that the stones that surround the village were actually at people at one time, where they were people and they come back to life
and they turn into stone.
Yeah, and they were turned to stone, and there was this kind of secret society within the village that were doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
And, it was really kind of involved for a little kid to take in.
Yeah, very unnerving.
Very scary as well, but it was some great TV, and absolutely. I can understand. I had many nightmares watching that. I mean, it got to the point where my parents were actually considering not letting me watch it anymore. But it wasn't very long, and there weren't many episodes. There weren't that many.
I think there was only like 6 or 7 episodes.
Yeah, and then it was over.
And that was it.
Done.
Yeah, then it was done.
But a great show. I mean, one of the highlights of my growing up, and like we were talking about earlier, that we're exposed to all this kind of occult and paranormal and stuff like that. And when you maybe that's what triggers you when you're at a young age and you watch these kind of programs, and because you've got people writing kids TV that is quite broad and open-minded, that they're not really held back by what they can do. It's like if they got a good idea, put it out there. And this is before. I mean, of the 70s, it's before like Star Wars hit and everybody goes Star Wars crazy and everybody wants to make sci-fi programs. But before that, it was more of that you really had to. The writers really had to think about what they were writing and physically make the programs interesting to keep. I mean, I had the attention span of a budgie back then, so it was hard enough for me to sit in front of a telly and watch a 25-minute program once a week.
Yeah.
But some of these programs had me hooked.
Now, there was one show that it came out in 1979, and it was a show that I remember I really wanted to watch because I'd seen the previews for it. 'Cause, they'd preview the show.
Yeah.
Next Thursday on BBC One. And it was called the Omega Factor.
Oh yeah.
And this was about psychical research and dark magic and the like. And I remember seeing the first episode at a friend's house. And I remember being a little disturbed by it. And the friend I was with was a little disturbed by it too. And he kept trying to change the subject, or let's watch something else, or let's go do this. And I was like, no, I want to watch this. Leave me the fuck alone.
The thing was back then, you had to watch it because if you didn't watch it, you couldn't record it.
Oh, absolutely.
That was it. It was gone.
Yeah, if you missed it, that was it. That was it.
That was it. Yeah.
And I remember years later, in the mid to late '80s. I mean, I always remembered the show, but obviously you couldn't see it anywhere. You couldn't get it on tape. It wasn't available to purchase. They never rebroadcast it, so it was like I remembered it, but that was it. I remember being in a secondhand bookstore, and I found the novelization.
Oh, okay. All right.
Of the Omega Factor.
I didn't know there was a book on it.
Yeah, and I bought it. It was like 50p or something. And I remember I devoured the book. I read the book from cover to cover, and I absolutely loved it. And I had this thing buried in my mind for years, like, oh my, this would make such a good movie, or why can't I find this? And then in like the late 90s, early 2000s, they released the entire series on DVD in the UK. And by then I was living in the United States, but as luck would have it, I was going on vacation, on a holiday to the UK to see my family. And I popped down to 008 Smith's, and there it was.
I'll have a copy of that if you don't mind.
I'll have one of them, please. so I bought the DVDs, and then when I got back home, I immediately ripped the discs and made digital copies and watched the entire series. And don't get me wrong, the series is very, very good. But because the majority of my memory consisted of the book, it wasn't as good as the book. The book
that's the problem.
was incredible.
That's the problem. When you read a book and then you want to go see the program, or the program comes out, or you always have a place built in your mind that when you read the book, it's built up this kind of, this kind of fantasy world of what you perceive it to be, and yet you're now watching it through someone else's perception. So sometimes that works. I mean, it kind of worked with Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing, but most of the time it
But what's
doesn't
weird,
really
though,
work.
Reeves, is that, I mean, from my perspective, the book was better than the TV show, but the book was based on the TV show, not vice versa.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you. One of my other shows was Space 1999.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. I was mad for that show.
Let me
it.
let me just play the opening theme for the Omega Factor. Then we'll move on to Space 1999. This is the creepy opening for this paranormal thriller set in Scotland called The Omega Factor. So I mean, this TV show, it's, if you're into the paranormal and or dark stuff and magic and stuff, this is definitely something that you should seek out. Now, I think all of the episodes are available on YouTube, so if you want to get a quick fix of the Omega Factor, you can shoot over to YouTube, do a quick search, and find most, if not all, of the episodes on YouTube. But if you do have the time, money, and inclination, I would strongly recommend you hop over to Amazon and get the box set of the show. Very good stuff, though. Now, you mentioned Space 1999.
Yeah, such a great show.
Now, Space 1999 was one of those shows that I loved to watch, but could rarely watch it. And I'll tell you why. Because they messed with the schedule on this show so much that I never knew when it was on TV. And I would stumble across it by accident and be hypnotized. It was like one of those shows that they wanted to kill. So they kept moving it around all the time.
Yeah. It did have a lot of different TV slot times.
So it was never on so I never knew when it was on. But it was like the look and feel of Space 1999 was very 2001: A Space Odyssey. And kind of the episodes themselves had a kind of a Star Trek vibe. But the best thing was the theme tune.
Oh yeah.
This is one of the greatest TV show theme tunes ever. Listen to this. awesome is that?
Well, they actually they changed it, didn't they? They changed the introduction.
They did.
They made a different theme tune. I think it was
for season 2. They fucked it up. Listen to season 2. Yeah, they messed up number 2.
Yeah. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like the intro to like a police episode or something.
It does.
You know, it's like a Starsky and Hutch style program.
Yeah, they messed it up.
No, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah, but the first one was spectacular.
Oh, that's Space 1999. that's a Space 99 intro. Yeah, that was brilliant. And I love the show, even though I think actually, if you remember, I don't remember all the episodes, but I remember the episode when they go through the cave and they all come out as cave people. They go back in time and they come out as Neolithic ape men, and they're all grunting. They lost the ability to talk and stuff. But I also remember the one when they first make contact with these kind of Mekon people who have got this spaceship, and they land and they say that we're on our way to, we've got the technology in our ship, and we're on our way to Earth. We can take you to Earth, because obviously the pretense of Space 1999 was, for anyone that doesn't know, the Moon Base Alpha, which is a space base on the moon. There was they had a nuclear dump there, and there was an explosion, and it blew the moon out of orbit, and the orbit of the moon has gone, and the moon's flown off into deep space, and of course it's the adventures of them on the moon, on Moon Base Alpha, going through all these different weird places. But they meet these aliens, and this is the scariest episode that shocked me a little bit. They offer one passage for one person to go to Earth, because they're on their way there, and they've got this ship that can travel at these speeds, and of course they vote one person to go. It's going to be a messenger to let people on Earth know that everyone's okay on Moon Base Alpha. But she gets double crossed, and this guy, another scientist guy, he gets in her place, and he goes onto the ship, and they go in these kind of like these sleep cylinder things. Mm-hmm. And the thing was that the ship's in deep space, and what happens is it's not compatible with him, because it was set up for the woman, and he wakes up sealed in this clear coffin thing, and he realizes he's only been asleep for about 40 minutes, and it's going to take hundreds of years to get to Earth. So he's slowly going to suffocate. Oh, and that's how it ends.
Oh, it's horrific.
Of him clawing at the oh, it's just like, wow, that really sort of that imprinted on my brain.
Oh man. Now, another thing with Space 1999 is they actually named the date. September 13th, 1999 is when the explosion happens.
Yeah.
So I remember back then, September of 1999, I remember the internet was buzzing with people talking about, well, hey, today's the day when Moon Base Alpha gets blown out of orbit. And what was great was one of the original cast members of Space 1999.
The Shape of Water is one.
Let me get rid of that ad. Space 1999. One of the original actresses. I forget the Asian lady. I can't remember her name. In the show.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I know the one you're on about. Yes.
So she played one of the main characters on Space 1999. So what they did was they got her back. And they dressed her up, in the original costume, and they made like a set from the show.
Okay.
And she broadcast on that day the final message from Moon Base Alpha. And because this is the era of the internet and YouTube, here it is.
This is Moon Base Alpha calling Earth.
Nimbus Alpha for the Earth. This is Nimbus Alpha with our last transmission to the people of our home planet.
We cannot know if you will receive this message, or if memory survives or even exists in your time of who we were, what our purpose was, and the disaster that took us on our random journey through the infinite reaches of space and time. We calculate it is some 20 years since we lost contact with you. For us, this has been a time of dangers overcome, knowledge revealed, of mysteries encountered, perceptions altered, and a growing conviction of a higher purpose in everything that we have witnessed and endured. These long years have stretched to the limit our will to survive as individuals and as a community, and overcoming our greatest test, the struggle to hold true to our unique birthright.
So that was a nice touch, I thought, for them to do something like that, to kind of throw that in there. Because there are still a lot of Space 1999 fans out there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that a lot of there's been so many rumors over the years of like they're going to do a reboot or it's going to be Space 2099, set it 100 years in the future and do the same kind of thing. But who knows? But it was a fun show. I just wish as a kid I could have watched it more than I actually did. And it wasn't through lack of trying. It was just that it was very difficult to find out when it was on, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. Is like these shows they tend to. I mean, we didn't have that many channels over here. Well, you have 3 channels.
Yeah.
And you'd think that because there was so much. I suppose they had to move programming around, and kids TV was the one that got moved around because it was kids TV. People wanted to see a Generation Game and the 2 Ronnies. That's more important than some bloody Space 999. You want your Starsky and Hutch at 9 o'clock. That's what you want, and not your 9 o'clock news on BBC Two.
Yeah, totally.
But it's still nonetheless it still goes down as one of the classics. But we go from that. I mean, do you remember? Do you actually remember when technology started to come into? We had like the Adventure Game and Nightmare, and where it would all be kind of like green screened, and it would all be like the whole environment of the show would be like computer generated.
Yeah,
and the kids in the show would actually get like vaporized and incinerated and stuff. do you remember that? And the screen would like go red, like obviously because of their blood and stuff, I suppose. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was kind of macabre. That was. I mean, I remember watching the Adventure Game, and they had this. The kid would wear this helmet, and the other kids would tell him which way to go. And they had this kind of maze with these pads that they would step on, which were all connected together. And there was these lightning bolts that would randomly shoot up. Obviously, it's an overlay, computer overlay. And if the kid was stepped in the wrong one, the lightning bolt would shoot up, and the kid would just basically
he'd be dead.
burnt to a crisp. He'd be dead. That would be it.
Yeah.
Game over.
And the secret of those shows was what they didn't broadcast was that the kids literally would actually die. Like they would be killed, like literally.
You could imagine, right? Could you imagine there's like some sort of real satanic under the table betting going on with is he going to live or not? I'll give you 15 quid on that.
I bet 12 quatloos. Oh no, man! It's
macabre, mate. That's macabre.
It's good stuff, though.
But they were great. They were great kids shows.
They were.
I mean, they didn't really have any message.
And the strange thing is, I mean, my kids are older now. I got a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old. But when they were growing up, in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, from 2002 onward.
What was there?
Well, when you have little kids, you kind of get back into kids TV, not because you want to, but because you kind of have to, because you sit there with your kids and you put on the television and then you watch kids shows.
Yeah.
And some of the shows for little kids, for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years old, those are still very similar to the shows that we remember as children. Very little characters and stuff, and very, very similar. But from say 5-year-old onward, then it's very different. It's very different. You'll have cartoons, situations, or if this involves a family. I think we might have mentioned this on another podcast where, like on the Disney Channel, they have a lot of situation comedies based from kids, right? From say 8 to 12-year-old kids. And the father is always some bumbling buffoon, some imbecile. The mother is always very smart on it and trying to keep the family together, and the kids are always smarter than both the mom and the dad, and they're trying to orchestrate some elaborate plot to get their own way. And that's the kind of vibe you get, that kind of I guess cultural conditioning that's being pushed out now, which wasn't so much, whereas in our day, when we were lads, when we were little kids, the shows we'd be watching, we'd be watching shit like this.
Oh yeah,
it's a little different.
It is. Yeah, there's a show over here. I can't remember the name of it, but.
Right, we'd be watching that. Whereas now kids are like, Dad, you're such a fucking asshole. Mom hates you. Right, it's different.
Very different. I mean, you have to. I mean, I don't think the Teletubbies are big anymore. I think that they've all kind of their hype fame has gone. But I mean, fair enough. We had stuff like Thomas the Tank Engine, like a talking train, Mr. Conductor, and we had Bagpuss. Bagpuss. What else did we have?
Bagpuss. Wait, hold on.
Mungo, Mary, and Midge. They used to live in the tower block.
Hold on, Bagpuss. Bagpuss is important.
Yeah.
Okay, now I gotta tell you, Bagpuss was a big. This is fucked up. Bagpuss was a big part of my childhood. Right.
Same here. Yeah. Same here.
I always found the episodes soul-crushingly depressing.
They were. Yeah, they were very sad. They were sad.
They were very sad. Very sad.
But it was always good to have a dose of something like Mr. Ben afterwards.
They were very sad and very depressing. And here's now I'm going to play it right. I'm going to play the theme for Bagpuss. Now I'll play it. It's only like 30 seconds. I'll play it in its entirety. And try not to slit your wrists after listening to this.
Once upon a time, not so long ago, there was a little girl, and her name was Emily. And she had a shop. There it is. It was rather an unusual shop because it didn't sell anything. You see, everything in that shop window was a thing that somebody had once lost, and Emily had found, and brought home to Bagpuss. Emily's cat, Bagpuss. The most important, the most beautiful, the most magical, saggy old cloth cat in the whole wide world. Well now, one day Emily found a thing. And she brought it back to the shop and put it down in front of Bagpuss, who was in the shop window, fast asleep as usual. But then Emily said some magic words. Bagpuss...
Wait. Do you know the magic words, Reeves?
Bagpuss, something furry, Bagpuss. Oh my God, no! I kind
Bagpuss,
of yes,
so
no,
Bagpuss,
yes.
so soft, furry cat foot puss.
That's it. Soft furry cat puss. That's it. God, you're digging in my brain now.
Oh, let's hear it.
Dear Bagpuss, old fat furry cat puss, wake up and look at this thing that I bring. Wake up, be bright, be golden and light. Bagpuss, oh, hear what I sing.
And then what does he do?
He goes, "Oh."
And Bagpuss was wide awake.
There you go. Bagpuss was wide awake.
Bagpuss was wide awake, but listen. This shop is a shop full of the undead.
Yes.
Because she is using some serious... We're talking about witchcraft.
Pretty
Emily
much.
is using some serious
Pretty much.
witchcraft to zombify all those animals and bring them back to life.
Well, the ending of the show, I don't know if I have the end theme here, but the ending of the show was particularly soul crushing. It was very depressing when everything
They all go,
yeah.
Their suspended animation. The mice go back into the mouse organ,
yeah,
like, and as like transfers, and the bird is a stick figure thing, and the toad goes back as a puppet. Oh, it's like reverse. It's like things dying.
Let's see if I can find the ending here, so we can play how fucked up the ending is of Bagpuss.
Cloth cat.
There we go.
Baggy, the mice.
There we go. Okay, watch this.
And so their work was done.
He goes back to sleep.
Bagpuss
He dies,
took a big yawn and settled down to sleep. And of course, when Bagpuss goes to sleep, all his friends go to sleep too. The mice were ornaments on the mouse organ. Gabriel and Madeleine were just dolls. And Professor Yaffle was a carved wooden bookend in the shape of a woodpecker. Even Bagpuss himself, once he was asleep, was just an old, saggy cloth cat. Baggy and a bit loose at the seams. But Emily loved him.
As you see all these thousands of children in the late 1970s hanging themselves at the end of this fucking show.
It's like I'm getting depressed right now, and it's New Year's Day.
All fucking droves of children like leaping off cliffs from watching that shit. But yeah, Bagpuss. And you know what's crazy is when my daughter was real little, when she was like 2 or 3 years old, we went to the UK, and the complete series of Bagpuss was on DVD, so I bought it.
Okay.
And I brought it home, and she would watch Bagpuss as a little kid.
Yeah.
And she got into it. She really enjoyed the show as a little child, watching these episodes. I doubt she'd even remember it now, but when she was little, we would watch it together. You know, these old.
But there were a load of those kind of shows.
Yeah.
There was Bagpuss. There was Finger Bobs.
Oh my god.
There was the Clangers. Remember the Clangers and the Soup Dragon? The
Yeah.
racket that thing used to make. Oh, horrific.
Yeah, Finger Bobs was great though, because that guy was he was.
Yoffie lifts a finger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was very disturbing, but he was.
Yoffie lifts a. He's got a little neckerchief on.
Yoffie lifts
Looking to give me that look.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
All right, let's have a look at this fucking maniac. Finger Bobs. There he is.
Finger Bobs. Yoffie lifts a finger, and a mouse is there. Puts his hands together, and a seagull takes the air. Yoffie lifts a finger, and a scampi darts about. Yoffie bends another, and a tortoise head peeps out. These hands were made for making, and making they must do.
Oh my god. Finger Bobs. Holy shit.
Finger Bobs, yeah.
It's
Finger
very,
Bobs,
this was
you've
very
got
like
one
kind
here.
of very kind of folky kind of.
Very folky, yeah. Very
folky, kind
folky,
of
and those
hippie.
lyrics have got some very dark undertones.
He loves a
You've got Chigley, you've got Camberwick Green.
Yeah. What about this one, dude? You gotta remember this one.
Here is the clock, the Trumpton clock, telling the time steadily, sensibly, never too quickly, never too slowly, telling the time for Trumpton.
Oh.
That's some memories, eh, Reeves?
Yeah. What's his name? Windy Miller.
That was Brian Kent was the voice
Brian
there.
Kent. That's it. Play school.
And he recently died.
Yes,
like
he did.
I don't know, just a few months ago.
3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He did the playaway, didn't he? Through the square window, through the round window.
Yeah.
And he did a load of those. Actually, he did some of those school programs as well that we were talking about earlier in the show.
Yeah, he did.
He was on a few of those learning programs as well.
Right.
But it's like him, Brian Kent, Derek Griffith as well, the guitar.
Yeah.
You know, he was like a main staple of childhood programs for learning.
There was another
stuff.
one too. That chick, was there Chloe something? What was her name? She used to be in that same kind of group with those guys. The thing.
Do you remember Magpie?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, Magpie was like the rival to Blue Peter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But Magpie was a little bit cooler.
Yeah, it was.
And it had a quite more of a hip intro.
One for sorrow, two for joy, three for a girl and four for a boy, five for silver, six for gold, seven for a secret never to be told.
Yeah, it was like Blue Peter on acid.
That's definitely an album track.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
You know,
remember
that's
this?
Definitely.
Remember this one?
Oh yeah. Go.
Two banana, three banana, four bananas make a bunch and so do many more. Over hill and highway the banana buggies go, coming on to bring you the banana split show. Making up a mess of fun, making up a mess of fun, lots of fun for everyone. Tra-la-la, la-la-la-la, tra-la-la.
Thank God for YouTube, man.
I tell you, if you want a bit of banana splits, you can't have a bit of banana splits without the double deckers.
Oh, I got a story. Okay, hold on.
Get on board, come and join the double deckers. Take a ticket for a journey on a double-decker London bus. Ring the bell to the horn when you ride with the double-deckers. Fun and laughter is what we're after on a double-decker bus.
That's the greatest hideout ever, dude. So my double-decker story is, remember Brains on it? That the kid with the glasses?
Yeah, the really clever kid with the glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, his grandmother lived 2 doors from me.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And in the summers, he used to come over for a day or two and to see his grandmother.
Did he get like all the kids outside of his house?
And everyone was
stuff?
like, "It's fucking Brains!"
Yeah, because he was quite well known. He was one of the main characters.
Yeah, and he would come and see his grandmother like on the down low. And I remember being with my dad driving past his grandmother's house and seeing him coming out with his dad to get into their car, walking out of the house and stuff.
Do you want to know a little bit of other trivia as well?
Yeah.
So they say. Do you remember the kids' TV show called Animal Quackers?
Oh, was that
And you,
Johnny?
Animal Quackers, the guys that used to dress up as animals and play pop songs.
Oh, yeah.
Well, apparently that was Slade.
I heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, when you watch,
because they needed people who can actually physically
play the stuff.
Instruments.
And when you watch them, if you ever watched it, like you sent me a video of them the other day, and when you watch them, the way they move and play the guitars,
yeah.
It's
and the
like
way they hold their instruments.
it's the same.
Stuff,
It's the same as fucking Slade.
I was mad for that. Mad for a bit of Animal Quackers.
Mad for it, yeah. Mad for it, great, yeah. Mad
and they had the spaceship at the beginning, and they used to go off and go into space and shit. That was mind blowing.
Oh man.
There was some great TV shows around that era.
Back in our day, Reeves, we had some great.
It was a long time ago.
Oh.
It was a long time ago, and I think a lot of people.
Great. Oh, it was champion. It was grand.
Oh, it's just grand.
It was grand. Champion.
Grand.
Oh, I know. Well, I think we've reminisced enough, Reeves.
Yeah, it was great.
It's been great. It's been fun. It's been awesome.
It's been fun. It's been a nice little chat.
It has. So let's close it out with one of the most terrifying, unnerving, and messed up themes from children's television. The show and the theme, of course. We're going to leave you with Children of the Stones. Until next time, try not to freak out.